Understanding working capital and maintaining your farm's financial position, especially when we're in an ag downturn. That's the topic of this episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I'm only going to just throw it out there right now. I know that this is not as sexy as how to grow 2 more bushels of corn. I know that you love the agronomic stuff. I know that we love big yields and we love big crops, all that stuff. But guess what? If you don't take care of your financial house, there will be no legacy. There will be no generational farm. There will be no big crops you can drive by and get excited about because they'll be somebody else's. I say this a lot because I always think we owe it to you as an XtremeAg follower to bring you business topics. That's what we're doing today. I've got Garrett, one of the founders of XtremeAg. Sitting next to him in his office is Jeff Janssen, who is a financial services manager for JC Ag Financial Services out of Dunlap, Iowa. They are here to talk to you frankly about money. It's the end of 2024 when we're recording this, right? It's around Christmas time, 2024, the first ag downturn year we've had in the last 4. 2020 was okay. We got a bunch of financial bailouts from the government, 2019 even, all that TARP money and MFP money and all that. 21, 22, and 23, record farm income years. Now you're sitting here with a different situation. You hear on the talking heads on the radio saying, you got to just maximize your working capital. You got to just, preserve your working capital. What does that even mean? Financial strategies and farm talk that can help your farm survive and thrive into the next generation. That's what we're here for. So, Mr. Janssen, thanks for being here. You're a former banker. You now are a financial advisor. Kelly calls you the CFO, the sort of consulting CFO to Garrett Land and Cattle. What is working capital and why do I care?
Yeah, just kind of on the base level, obviously the working capital on your balance sheet, that's the difference between your current assets and your current liabilities. So simplify this just to one crop year. So your current assets are going to be at the end of the year, so where we're sitting now in December, what's in your bank account, what do you have for grain inventories, do you have any accounts receivable from any custom work that you've done, and have you maybe prepaid any expenses? If you paid for some anhydrous that's in the ground right now, that's your current asset. Then you mark that.
By the way, I want to just throw it out there. Most people understand balance sheet. It's assets on one side, liabilities on the other. But you use the word current assets. I got $400,000 worth of machinery bought and paid for. Is that a current asset?
That's your intermediate asset. So there's 3 components. There's current, intermediate, and long-term. So you put your machinery in your intermediate, and that's more kind of that long-term growth of your balance sheet. But your working capital is truly kind of that measurement of this year's success.
So current asset is not a machinery because that's an intermediate. Current asset certainly then would not be land because that's going to be long-term asset. Yep. So current asset, again, the category, you can't name them all, but a few of the categories that apply would be what's in my bank account,
cash, grain inventories. If you have livestock that's marketable, ready for sale, any prepaid expenses you have prepaid seed, have you prepaid some fertilizer that you've already booked and paid for, that's now a current asset.
Yeah. And then, grain would be the one that most people listening to this would have. And so that counts because it's anything that's readily almost liquid or pretty much is liquid, right?
Correct.
Current liabilities. Okay. My mortgage then is not a current liability because it's over 10 or 15 or 30 years.
The principal balance of your mortgage is a long-term liability. However, the current portion of what that principal and interest is due, that is a current liability.
So should I call it like my monthly payment on all my farm ground is $5,000, and so we'll call current liability of the land 1 year's worth of payment?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So now, obviously, if you have a line of credit balance at your bank, that's obviously your current liability. If you have any account payables at the co-op, do you owe them for any seed, fertilizer, chemical, any fuel, any work that they've done for you? So any bills that you have yet to pay to close out this year's crop.
Well, that's assuming that I pay my bills within 12 months. I usually don't. I let those bastards twist in the wind, Jeff. I mean, I figure, you know what? They were dumb enough to sell it to me. I sometimes go 2 and 3 years. I mean, don't you think that's a good strategy?
If you can get terms like that, then go for it.
All right. Difference then between working capital and net worth is long-term balance sheet stuff is factored into that.
Yeah. So if you think about it again, on that 1 year of a working capital, you get through the year, you have working capital left over. Well, now you're going to make your machinery payments. which your intermediate assets would be your machinery, your intermediate liabilities would be your debt on that machinery. Well, now you make that payment, your principal goes down, you've increased your equity in your machinery. You then make your land payment, your principal balance on your land goes down, and you gain more equity in your land. So now your positive working capital, your increase in equity in intermediate, and your increase in equity in long-term then grows that net worth on there, which is that measurement of the long-term viability of your operation.
So the reason we hear this, and by the way, Kelly, if I missed anything here, I know that I sometimes I ask the question that I think that some of our listeners might be embarrassed to ask because there's no such thing as a dumb question. We're obviously an informational format and platform. That's why you guys started XtremeAg. We hear working capital talk more when the belt tightens in ag, right? Like this, we didn't hear this so much in 21, 22, 23. Everybody's flying high. The tide's up. Now you've been here. Am I right? Hell, you can't drive down the road without hearing somebody in ag, a talking head, talk about working capital.
That's absolutely true. And the reason is because your $4 corn, we're not replenishing that working capital like we did. We're not necessarily making money. We talked about how many dollars per acre I lost on soybeans. That's negative working capital. There's a perfect example.
Yeah. So there's a perfect example. So Jeff, before we go into this, I mean, we can talk about different crops or different, also whatever. Why it matters to a farm operation is the farm operation. I think some are going to say, yeah, but my debt to assets, I'm good. I got that farm over there's paid for. I don't have hardly any machinery expense. There's people that I think probably that work in this industry that don't realize why it matters. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you might have equity in your land. Well, unless you're generating enough income from that land to make your payments, you're gonna lose your working capital. So, I mean, just because you're asset rich on the bottom half of your balance sheet, to have a successful operation, you need to be able to generate positive working capital each growing season. That shows that you have a viable business plan. That shows that what you're doing is continuing to earn money. If you have a negative working capital year after year, eventually that's going to start, just like we said, you add to your net worth, that's going to start chipping away at that net worth. So eventually, you're going to be at a situation where you're going to need to make some pretty drastic adjustments.
When I think about this, Kelly, using your example, that I think in 2025, when this episode releases, there's farming operations that are going to be in that situation where they might be planting into a break-even scenario or even planting into a possible loss scenario, barring any government intervention, which, let's face it, has happened most of the time since the late 80s with programs and, certain things to prop up a little bit of farm income. So they might be looking at a situation as you were with the soybean thing. It's not just saying, oh, yeah, I'm losing money. It's one thing to say, oh, I lost $10 on that. You deployed a lot of money to lose money. And I think that's where the double drawdown on the whole thing, kind of explain that, if you will.
Yeah, you deploy a lot of money, and then you're looking at the interest has come down a little bit, but you're looking at 7-8% interest. So a break even, it really could be argued as a 7 or 8% profit because you got to pay that line of credit back. Think about the 8% of work. Think about the 8% interest that the working capital is going to get eaten up with. I mean, there's an example right there. So if it's a break even, you really are, there's a bit of a profit there before the interest is figured in, if that makes sense. That's an odd way to say that, but it's easy in this economy, in this time, to eat up that working capital.
Jeff, answer to that. In other words, Kelly, I think about a year ago when these interest rates climbed and we were sitting around historically low interest rates, and all of a sudden we go to 8% operating loan, 7 or 8% operating loan. And I remember hearing somebody at an ag session saying, well, we went up 4% on interest rates. I'm like, no, we went up 100%. We went from 4 to 8. That's a doubling. If the price of seed went from $200 a bag to $400, it didn't go up. It went up double. And I think that really changed the whole discussion around working capital, because now you're obligating $70 an acre just of interest payment. So kind of speak to that.
Yeah, so exactly. So if you think about what we do every year is we put together a business plan. So if you're going to have positive working capital at the beginning of the year, you have to have a plan to generate that positive working capital. So as you mentioned, an operating interest, we want to look at what we can do to reduce a cost of production. One of those items is, hey, how do we tie up maybe cash sales, grain sales to coincide with large payments or rent payments that are due, so we can minimize the interest that producer is going to incur on their farm. So marketing then becomes not so much just a pie in the sky, let's go for good prices. Marketing then is then tied right along to the cash flow of each operation to maximize, interest reduction on there. Like you said, we had a couple of examples of some guys over the last couple of years when we started working with them. They were working in, borrowing, probably $20 to $30 an acre on interest expense, operating interest expense. We kind of got them, hey, our plan is to eliminate that operating interest. Let's get you on a track where we can do that. Well, now they're working in a cash plus where they're receiving cash income. So just by kind of finding better ways, better timing of sales and better timing of their cost of production analysis, we now have, saved them that $30 an acre in interest.
There's a thing where farmers like to hold grain, and to your point right there, thinking that it's an asset, as opposed to realizing that on the other side of the ledger, they're paying for an operating loan, and that's where you talk about being a CFO for a farm. So have you had to have, even with Kelly, who's a pretty business-oriented farmer, say, hey, you need to be selling more stuff? Why? Well, because you're obligating interest over here, and so that crop that's in that bin needs to go up 11% to justify the trade-off.
Yeah, we show them the numbers right there, and it's kind of funny. Once in a while, you hear a farmer say, well, I got 2 guys on staff. I need to keep them busy, so I don't want to sell it all now. I need something for them to do, later in the year. I'm like, well, at that rate, and you show them, once you lose that interest on there, you better be selling at 10, 15, 20 cents higher per bushel to offset that. So it's kind of a matter of you make the money when you can, get the interest reduced.
I'm all about selling it in December and January when the basis is good and things like that. And, Creed sells it, tells us when to go, but he knows I want to sell it. So we don't have any trouble like that. The problem we have is I'm not the guy with the cash plus in the checking account. I'm not always the guy with the low interest payment per acre, because it seems like we're in a constant state of expansion, Dame. So I want you to know he's not talking about me with money in the bank account, because we're always buying something.
Also, he's not talking about you with somebody that says, well, gosh, I got to keep these 2 employees busy all year round. I've been to Garrett Land and Cattle. There's no shortage of work for the workers to do. So, I mean, I can look in any direction and get overwhelmed about all the work that needs done. So I don't think that's an issue.
It's not. It's truly not.
You're a former banker. Give me a banker's perspective. I heard David Cole. I see him a lot on the speaking circuit. I've heard other ag lenders and consultants, and so I sit through a lot of these sessions. And one of the points was at a ag lenders summit. He said, "I'm getting," and this was during the last run up between 2005 and 2013 when we had a ag super cycle. And he said, "I'm getting a little concerned about some of the ledgers, some of the book of business among some of you ag banks, when I hear these 33-year-old ag lenders say, if you got the dirt, you can't get hurt," meaning they thought that a loan was good as long as it was pledged against real estate. And of course, the dialogue went, Jeff, yeah, that's not always true, because again, we could see vast declines in real estate, which we haven't since the 80s. But then there's also the reality of there's other things other than just pledged dirt. So I want you just to give me a banker's perspective from the dirt you can't get hurt thing to the working capital. Give me everything in between.
Yeah, having a business plan that's selling your dirt at the end of the year is going to take care of things is a pretty short-sighted business plan. So I guess the plan that we like to implement, the guys, is that long-term growth. So we take a look at our customers and say, where do we need? The very first thing that we do is we evaluate their cost of production. And I think Kelly can attest to this. We start working with somebody before we even sell a bushel of grain. We need to know what your cost of production is. How many dollars per acre does it take to grow your crop? So
okay,
we go.
Hang on. I'm done right. Banker's perspective. And I want to point out, all right, I have been around a lot of ag people that I wonder if they know their cost of production. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. They don't know.
They don't know.
I thought I was the best at it. I thought I knew. Jared and Jeff both told me most farmers don't know. And I said, I'm not that guy. I was that guy. I didn't know. I was wrong.
You underestimated the cost of production on soybeans. We've talked about that in a webinar and all that. And by the way, was the bulk of it on interest that you weren't properly, or machinery not properly attributing? where were you off on your cost of production calculation?
I think where most people get off, if you go to town and you say to somebody, what's your cost of production? Well, they're going to take a look at their inputs. They're going to look at their rent, their land payments, their machinery, maybe a crop insurance. But, as like where you're in town, you're getting a cup of coffee. Well, how'd you pay for that? That needs to go against your cost of production. You take a family vacation. Where's that go? That goes against your cost of production. So I think
lifestyle, you calculate lifestyle into cost of production?
Yeah. Yep.
Temple says that he can't buy a roll of toilet paper without Jeff marking it down somewhere.
Do you have you ever been to the lunchroom at Garrett Land and Cattle at lunchtime when there's gambling going on? Does gambling count as cost of production?
Yes. Yeah. We track that as well. But
when they play cards and they're putting their dollars on, you count that as cost of production.
Yeah, I keep an eye on it.
All right. So cost of production.
If you go into a year and you don't know what your cost of production is, you don't know what that hurdle is. I mean, you're basically living on a hope and a prayer that what you do during the year is successful. But you need to know that cost of production. We track it daily. So if Kelly goes to town today and makes a purchase, say buys another big pickup or something, we see that transaction come through. We're like, hey, we thought your cost of production was $1,100. We're seeing some more expenses coming in higher than what we had been budgeting. Your cost of production now is $1,120. So now we have a bigger hurdle on the revenue side that we need to overcome as well.
All right, I stand corrected. As the man that just returned from the chiropractor, I stand corrected. Anyway, I of all things, I figured that most folks are missing out on either insurance, taxes, depreciation. I figured that's where most of the mistaken or being off on your cost of production were. But you're actually saying you putting lifestyle in there as well.
Well, it's one of them, just a lot, obviously interest, interest is eye-opening for a lot of people to say, oh, you spent $40 an acre last year on operating interest. They don't understand that. So.
Yeah. So interest, obviously. So when we're sticking with the banker's perspective, are we going to see loans getting pulled because working capital gets degraded on some of these farming operations?
Absolutely. I mean, if true in the truest sense, if your working capital has been depleting more than 1 year, you have a business plan that's not working. So if that working capital continues to deplete, that impacts your ability to repay any obligations you have with that bank. So they're not going to let you get down to the point where, we've got to sell the dirt to do this. They're going to take an action plan to say, either you need to come up with a new plan, a new course of action to rectify this, or if you're not, I'm sorry, we're no longer going to be able to do business with you.
You're kind of a hard ass, aren't you, Jeff?
Try not to be, but yeah, I mean, the financial parts of it, it's pretty cut and dried. I mean, either if you're not making money or you're going behind, that's not a very viable game plan.
I was joking, of course, and you took it as such, but it does come down to it's numbers, and that's the tough part. All right, I got a lot more questions about this, including I want you to give me a couple of real life scenarios from your current work or even back when you were an ag lender. Before I do that, Nature's one of our business partners here at XtremeAg, awesome company. We're so happy to be working with them. Nature's is focused on providing sustainable farming solutions and helping maintain your crop's potential for today and for future generations. The Nature's high quality liquid fertilizers that are powered by Nature's BioK. That's a cool thing tying in with here in XtremeAg. Nature's BioK technology targets specific periods of influence throughout the growing season via precision placement techniques as a means to mitigate plant stress, enhance crop yield, and boost your farm's return on investment. We're talking about money right here, talking about stress reduction. It was a big objective of Kelly Garrett in the year 2022. And now we're also talking about making sure that you can peel back a little bit on your expense. Maybe you can actually just go out there and target periods of influence with your fertility program rather than fling it all out there at once. Back it up a little bit, put it out there when the plants can use it. You can save money and make more ROI. Also, Nature's is the sponsor for our first several episodes of The Granary, a new show that you should check out if you like what we do here at XtremeAg, and I know you do. The Granary, a show that is shot at my granary, my man room, that is an old 1800s era grain storage building in Huntington, Indiana on my farm. The guys have joined me there. We're sitting down. It's real talk with real farmers about everything from generational changes to family to running a business to how big is your farm and how big it should it be and all these kinds of questions. It's like The View, except that it's actually entertaining, intelligent, and you'd actually want to tune into it. Other than that, it's a lot like The View. All right. Back to this. Farm scenarios. Give me some farm scenarios as we have somebody, Jeff, that's listening that's saying, I don't know, things have been pretty good. And you're like, let me take you back 6 or 8 years. Let me take you back 20 years. Let me show you where I saw some farms get over their skis. Give me some examples.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that can happen is a farmer does not understand the actual position that they're in. And maybe they're at that, hey, I see my accountant once a year. I go see my banker once a year. So I take the other 363 days off and I'm out working. I'm out, what I think taking care of business. What they're not understanding is, hey, if your business plan is not set correctly, you're losing money every day. And the worst time to find out about that is at the end of the year before you've been able to make any corrections. So I say probably the biggest examples that we have when we start working with customers is getting that transparency to what their cost of production is. And then the bigger piece then is coming up with some additional revenue generation streams that we can do as well.
Kelly picks on me about my dairy farm background, so I try to reference it as often as possible in front of him to let him know that I'm prideful about my dairy farm background, that I ate Holstein steaks growing up. But I can remember an old dairy farmer sitting down, kind of like you're talking about, at the kitchen table with his wife, and I happened to be visiting him, and I had to do some other work, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "We're just sitting here putting pen to paper trying to figure out how we're going broke making milk." And it's kind of that thing you talk about. It'd be nice to know that before you're there. And I think that's what you're just talking about.
I think that's the biggest mistake that growers make, Damian, is they see the banker once a year. They see the CPA once a year. I'm not trying to pick on bankers, but bankers are overworked. They don't have enough time to analyze your balance sheet. The banker is trying to get you approved. This is the experience that I've had, and I didn't understand it when I was younger until I started to work with Jeff and Jared. That the banker wants you to get approved. He's not working against you, but he does not have time to put in the financial analysis to study that. And then when you go through a whole year and you haven't seen him since last December, all of a sudden you're being reactive. We need to be proactive. And as a farmer, as a grower, investing this much money, you're talking about people having $1,100 an acre invested in their corn crop or more. Yeah. 1,000-acre farmers, over $1 million invested, and you only look at the financial analysis of it once a year. And then you're reactive to the situation, to many things that are out of your control with the corn market, the weather, things like that. We have got to take control. And we've got to be more educated as growers, and we've got to be proactive and not reactive. And you cannot rely on that banker conversation once a year to be the only financial analysis that you have.
And to be honest, Kelly, Jeff says not to pick on bankers, and you were one, is that they want you to be viable so that they get paid. But their objective and your objective aren't necessarily the same objective.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
And it's not wrong. It's just that they've got a different objective. Mr. Janssen, strategies farmers can deploy to improve their financial position aside from just growing more crops or cutting back on expenses. I mean, the usual thing, I get it. It's commodity production. Make more with less, make more with less, make more with less. Eventually, that you can only make so much and you can only cut expenses so much. I mean, I'm not being mean, but there's some truth to that. I mean, at some point, what else can I do?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I always say you got to know the cost of production. We've been over that. But I also think the piece that a lot of people that we've worked with, we've talked a lot about the expenses, but a lot of people have had misses on the revenue side. A lot of guys maybe weren't incorporating a full marketing plan, having hedging accounts, looking for gains that they can get in their hedging account. A lot of guys didn't have the correct crop insurance aligned with, where they were. The right crop insurance plan can support your marketing plan. It can even be a revenue generator, some margin protection policies. So there's other ways within that farm that a lot of guys were just missing. They weren't aware that they could be generating additional revenue, for their farm.
Kelly, one thing, we've had this discussion about crop insurance. It's not just crop insurance like, oh, I totaled my car. You say it's got to be an integrated plan, and you do that with JC and Jared Creed and Jeff. It's got to be part of the revenue. It's more than just catastrophic. It's part of the revenue plan, because otherwise, like you said, you got $1,100 invested in an acre, and that's just input costs. That's not everything else you got. You've got to have a bigger picture view.
You got to have a bigger picture view, and crop insurance is part of your marketing plan. You're insuring revenue. You're not insuring bushels. You're insuring revenue, and it is a federal plan. no matter what my other XtremeAg partners have said at times, it is a federal plan. It is the same around the nation, and you're ensuring revenue. And we are lucky that the federal government subsidizes it, and we should take advantage of it. You cannot go and implement a marketing plan that if you go implement a marketing plan, then you're securing price, okay? But you're still not securing revenue, you're securing price. We still haven't taken the weather out of the equation. There is no better marketing plan or basis to a marketing plan than crop insurance, and it needs to be part of your financial analysis, and it needs to be utilized by your farm.
Mr. Janssen, I'm a farmer. I'm doing okay. Oh, by the way, when I said strategies other than just cut back on expenses and growing more crops, see the banker. What's your other advice? I'm a farm guy. I'm trying to weather the storm. What do I need to know? What's your?
Yeah, and I also say, don't. And I've talked with Kelly about this as well. Is there's times downtime on your farm. Well, don't sit around and woe me. Things aren't good. Look around the Garrett land and cattle. There's people moving everywhere. Kelly isn't just producing corn and soybeans. We have guys, they go out, hey, you got a sprayer, go find some acres to spray. You got some equipment, go find some ways to bring in some additional money to that farm. You've got the equipment, you've got some time, you bring in 25, 30 grand just on helping a guy do a project, that drives that margin down. That helps you. So, I know it's kind of out of the, norm. Nope, I should just be sitting here waiting for the crop to grow. You need to get a hustle. You need to get out there and find a way to get some money coming in.
Intentional congruence.
I'm telling you what, if this guy was my banker, he's kind of a hard ass, because I'd probably go in there and say, yeah, things are a little tight. He'd say, get off your ass and do something. This guy is kind of a whip cracker.
That, there's a local family here that the dad and I are about the same age, and the boys are about the same age as my boys, and he's wanting to pass the farm down to him, and he knows that we're working on succession, and we have a lot of conversations, and he's like, we don't farm as many acres as you, what can we do? And I'm like, you've got those 2 grain trucks. Those boys need to get in those trucks.
Yeah.
Those boys need to get in those trucks because their living expenses for the year could be made very easily with those trucks.
Yeah.
Those trucks aren't there just to be used during harvest. Those trucks can be used 2 or 3 days a week and provide an income for the household income, which of course he's going to track. That's intentional congruence.
And also, as you pointed out, you've got 4 things that are sitting that are not making. That in fact, they're all costing you money as they sit. The boys and the trucks are costing you money, and I know that when people love to say that, and Jeff, you probably can back us up. I've heard farm people so long say, "Well, I'm not worried. That's paid for." Well, it still has a cost, right? An asset that's paid for is sitting there. It still has a cost.
Even if you want to say that the truck is paid for, the light bill, the grocery bill, the gas bill is not paid for next month, and that truck could produce the revenue to provide that. And then it doesn't have to come off that acre of corn.
Yep. Jeff Janssen, I'm a farmer. I'm doing okay. I'm a little bit stressed out, financially, et cetera, et cetera. I come and see you for advice. And this is in your role as your financial services manager, or when you're a former banker with all the body of work and expertise you've accumulated. What's your first thing you'll tell me going here into 2025?
First thing I'm going to say is, what's your business plan? I need to know, do you understand what position you're in? If you're looking at $1,100 per acre cost of production, A, do they know that? B, obviously we're staring at $4 corn. Well, unless they can produce 260 bushels an acre, they have a negative working plan right there. So it's the first thing that I'm always looking for is the awareness to, do you know what situation you're in? And if not, we're going to show you exactly where you're at and what you need to do to address it.
And the person that just heard that say, wait a minute, these guys keep saying $1,100 per acre cost of corn. I can produce it for only $600 or $700, because what are they doing? To your point, they're not
figuring everything.
Yeah, they're not figuring everything on cost. Historically, we see consolidation happen during contraction, right? Contraction of the economics, and contraction then equals consolidation of the farming operation. Again, barring any big farming legislation that come out of USDA programs, whatever. If you're a person that wants to expand a little bit right now, Mr. Janssen, what do you tell them? What should I do?
Yeah, so hopefully if you're looking to expand right now, you've been taking care of your working capital the last couple of years. And by that, I mean, you don't need to be flush with working capital. But, if your working capital is maybe a 1-to-1, but you've been paying down intermediate debt, long-term debt, and there's a growth opportunity, now's the time where maybe you've had 2 years of not padding that, but you've built your equity. Now maybe you have to pull some equity out of your land to say, hey, there's some land available. I don't have the cash right now, but I've got some equity. I'm going to leverage some equity right now and go out and get some expansion done.
But even then, the leverage, you use that, but you're also then you're taking on a little bit, be cognizant, I guess, of the interest rate because you're yeah. Last thought on this whole thing about maximizing your farm's financial position. You've seen the storms. You've been around this for 30 plus years. What's your last piece of advice on maximizing your farm's financial position? I'll hear it from Jeff, then I'll hear it from Kelly.
Yeah, again, I'll just go back to, you need to know your situation. You need to know what you're up against. You need to know that what your expenses are for the year, and then you need to have a plan to act on that. You need to make sure that you're exhausting all revenue options, make sure you got the right crop insurance plan in place, make sure you've got a good marketing plan, and you need to monitor that every day. It can't be, hey, in January, that's a good plan. I'm in and wait to see how that happens. We need to be looking at that daily, to monitor it and make adjustments on the fly.
Kelly, I think that one has been, I've heard that now, and I think it's been repeated 3 times, and it's worth repeating. This is not a one day per year thing when you meet your accountant or your banker, because there's a very good chance stuff went off the rails in the last 300 days, 400 days, whatever the hell it was, and you need to make sure that you're on top of it.
Yes, I would tell you that you need to educate yourself and you need to understand it. And you also need to listen to the banker. You need to listen to the financial analysis. When we're talking about agronomy, is the agronomist you work with the guy that sells you all your NP and K? Did it ever occur to you that his job is to sell you the NP and K? Is he really looking out for your best interest? He's not. He doesn't want you to fail, but is he really working for you? Your banker doesn't want you to fail, but they work for the bank. They don't work for you. You're a customer of the bank. You need to have someone like Jeff, or you need to do it yourself, and you need to understand your position. You cannot rely on those other people all the time that are sitting on the other side of the table, and you've got to be proactive, not reactive. You've got to educate yourself, and you've got to understand the details.
I like it. A lot of good stuff right there. The main one is that it's kind of like the same reason you might have an independent agronomy person is because then you get straight information. The reason you have somebody like Jeff Janssen is because the banker does not work for your farming operation. They work for the bank. I think that's a very good point. And we're fine with banks, but just understand their objective.
I'm fine with the bank, but just understand what the relationship is. They're not bad. They're not wrong, but they don't work for you. You're a customer of them.
Yeah,
get somebody. If you can't do it yourself,
maximizing your profits. Maximizing your profits is your business.
Yes.
Maximizing their loan returns is their business.
At the end of the day, there's only one person that's going to look out for you, and that's you.
We're leaving it right there. Jeff Janssen with XtremeAg Financial Services. That's Jared Creed and the boys out of Dunlap, Iowa. If you want to learn more about that, find one of us and we can connect you with them and Mr. Janssen. Kelly Garrett, obviously Garrett Land and Cattle area in Iowa, which is really actually North Dow City, if anybody's been there, and I have. So anyway, until next time, thanks for being here. Hundreds of videos just like this. We've got, it's a free library of information. We've been recording the Cutting the Curve podcast now for 3.5 years. Go share this with somebody that can benefit from it. Also, if you want to up your game, become an XtremeAg member in 2025. For $750 a year, you can become a member, and you'll get a direct line of access to the guys like Kelly. If you want to go a little deeper on a subject, you can get a question and answer platform with them. You also get trial data at the end of the year that non-members don't get. You get special offers, like, for instance, from our friends at Nature's. You can go to Commodity Classic for free. So think about that. You're going to Commodity Classic for free, the $750 membership, it almost then pays for itself right there. I encourage you to check that out. Go to XtremeAg.farm. Until next time, thanks for being here. On behalf of Jeff Janssen, Kelly Garrett, I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation.